Hi everyone, this is Miss Sarah again. I'm going to start with Chapter 4 of Escape from Master Lemoncello's Library. This is our third video, well technically second video. The first video is Mr. Chris Grawenstein actually reading the first chapter himself. Okay, so Chapter 4. So excited. So exactly what kind of games are we talking about? I don't know, said Akimi. Fun book stuff, I guess. And do you think this new library will have equally new computers? Definitely. Wi-Fi? Probably. Kyle nodded slowly. And this all takes place Friday night? Yep. Akimi, I think you've just discovered a way for me to shorten my most recent grounditation. Your what? My game-deprived parental punishment. Kyle figured being locked in the library with computers on Friday night would be better than being stuck at home without any gaming gear at all. Can I borrow a pen and a sheet of paper? What? You're going to write your essay now? On the bus? Better late than never. They're due in homeroom, Kyle, first thing. Fine, I'll keep it brief. Akimi shook her head and handed Kyle a notebook and pen. The bus bounced over a speed bump on into the school driveway. He would need to make this essay really, really short. He was hoping that the 12 winners would be randomly pulled out of a hat or something, and like the lottery people always said in their TV commercials, you just had to be in it to win it. Meanwhile, in another part of town, Charles Chiltington was sitting in his father's library working with the college student who'd been hired to help him polish up his extra credit essay. He was dressed in his typical school uniform, khaki slacks, blue blazer, button-down shirt, and tastefully striped tie. He was also the only student in the Alexandriaville Middle School who was dressed that way. What's a big word for library? Charles asked his tutor. Teachers love big words. Book repository. Bigger, please. Athenaeum? Perfect! What's such a weird word? They'll have to look it up. Charles made a change, saved the file, and sent the document off to the printer. Your dad sure reads a lot, said his ELA tutor, admiring the leather-bound books lining the walls of Mr. Chiltington's home library. Knowledge is power, said Charles. It's one of our fundamental family philosophies. Another was, we eat losers for breakfast. Kyle and Akimi climbed off the bus and headed into the school. You know, said Akimi, my dad told me the library had like a bazillion different architects doing drawings and the blueprints, and so that they couldn't share with each other. How come? To keep everything super secret. My dad and his firm did the front door, and that was it. The second they stepped into Mrs. Cameron's classroom for homeroom period, Miguel Fernandez shouted, Hey Kyle, check it out, bro! He held up a clear plastic binder, maybe 2 inches thick. I totally aced my essay, man. The library dealio? Yeah, I put it in pictures and charts, plus a whole section on about the ancient library of Alexandria, Egypt, since it is Alexandriaville, Ohio. Cool, said Kyle. Miguel Fernandez was super enthusiastic about everything. He was also president of the school's Library Aid Society. Hey, Kyle, you know what they say about libraries? Not really. They have something for every chapter of your life. While Kyle groaned, the second bell rang. All right, everyone, said Mrs. Dana Cameron, Kyle's homeroom teacher. Time to turn in your extra credit essays. She started walking up and down the rows of desks. The judges will be meeting in the faculty lounge this morning to make the preliminary cut. Crap, thought Kyle. There were judges. This was not going to be the bingo ball drawing like a lottery. Mr. Keeley, the teacher, hovered over his desk. Did you write an essay? Yeah, sort of. I'm sorry, I don't understand. Either you wrote an essay or you didn't. Kyle half-heartedly handed over his hastily scribbled sheet of paper. And unfortunately, Mrs. Cameron read it out loud. Balloons. There might be balloons. The classroom erupted with laughter until Mrs. Cameron did the tilt down her glasses and glare over them thing, as she did to terrify everyone into silence. This is your essay, Kyle? Yes, ma'am. We were supposed to write why we're excited about the grand opening, and well, balloons are always my favorite part. I see, said Mrs. Cameron. You know, Kyle, your brother Curtis wrote excellent essays when he was in my class. Yes, Mrs. Cameron, mumbled Kyle. Mrs. Cameron sighed contentedly. Please give him my regards. Yes, ma'am. As Mrs. Cameron moved on to the next desk, Miguel eagerly handed over his thick booklet. Very well done, Miguel. Thank you, Mrs. Cameron. Kyle heard an odd noise out in the parking lot, a puttering, clunking, clanking sound. Oh my, said Mrs. Cameron. I wonder if that's him. She hurried to the window and pulled up the blinds. All the kids in the classroom followed her, and then they saw it. Out in the visitor parking lot, a car that looked like a giant red boot on wheels. It had a strip of notched black sole for its bumper. Thick shoelaces crisscrossed their way up from the windshield to the top of a 10-foot-tall boot collar. It looks just like the red boot from that game, said Miguel. Family Frenzy. Kyle nodded. Family Frenzy was Mr. Lemoncello's first and probably most famous game. The red boot was one of the 10 tokens you could pick to move around the board. A tall, gangly man stepped out of the boot car. It's Mr. Lemoncello, gasped Kyle, his heart racing. What is he doing here? It was just announced, said Mrs. Cameron. This evening, Mr. Luigi Lemoncello himself will be the final judge. Of what? Your library essays. Chapter 5. Eating lunch in the cafeteria, Kyle stared at his wilted fish sticks, wishing he could pull a magic take another turn card out of thin air. I blew it, he mumbled. Yep, Akimi agreed. You basically did. Can you imagine how awesome that new library is going to be if Mr. Lemoncello and his imagination factory guys had anything to do with it? Highly. Yes, I can. I'm kind of hoping I get to see it too. After all, I wrote a real essay, not one sentence about balloons. Thanks, rub it in. Akimi eased up a little. Hey Kyle, when you're playing a game like Sorry and you get bumped back 3 spaces, do you usually quit? No, if I get bumped, I play harder because I know I need to find a way to get back into those 3 spaces and pull ahead of the pack. Hey guys, Miguel Fernandez carried his tray over to join Kyle and Akimi. He was being followed by a kid with spiky hair and glasses the size of welder's goggles. You two know Andrew Pickleman, right? Hey, said Kyle and Akimi. Hello. Andrew is one of my top library aides, said Miguel. Cool, said Akimi. Mrs. Junghan, the librarian, just confirmed that Mr. Lemoncello is the top secret benefactor who had donated all the money to build our new public library. $500 million. She heard it on NPR, said Pickleman, who more or less talked through his nose. So we did some primary source research on Mr. Lemoncello and his connection to Alexandriaville. What'd you find out? Said Kyle. First off, said Miguel, he was born here. He had 9 brothers and sisters, added Andrew. All of them crammed into a tiny apartment with only 1 bathroom over in Little Italy, said Miguel. And, said Pickleman, sounding like he wanted to one-up Miguel, he loved the old public library down in Market Street. He used to go there when he was a kid and needed a quiet place to think and doodle his ideas. And get this, said Miguel eagerly. Mrs. Tobin, the librarian back then, took an interest in little Luigi, even though he was just, a kid like us. She kept the library open late some nights and let him borrow junk from her desk or her purse, thimbles and thumbtacks and glue bottles and red Barbie doll boots. Stuff he used for the game pieces so they can map out his first ideas on a library table. Then, Andrew jumped in. Then Mrs. Tobin took Mr. Lemoncello's sketch for the Family Frenzy game home to her husband, who ran a print shop. They signed some papers, created a company, and within a couple of years, they were all millionaires. But Miguel had the last word. Now, of course, Mr. Lemoncello is a bazillionaire. What are you 4 nerds so excited about? Said Haley Daly as she waltzed past with a gaggle of popular girls in her royal court. Haley was the princess of 7th grade. Blonde hair, blue eyes, blazingly bright smile. She looked like a walking toothpaste commercial. We're pumped about Mr. Lemoncello, said Miguel. And the new library, said Andrew. And, said Kyle melodramatically, just seeing you, Haley. You're so immature. Come on, girls. Haley and her friends flounced away to the cool kids' table. Check it out, said Akimi, gesturing toward the cafeteria's food line, where Charles Chillington, I cannot say his name, Chiltington was balancing 2 trays on his own and one for Mrs. Cameron. I'm so glad you could have lunchroom duty. You had lunchroom duty today, Mrs. Cameron, Kyle heard Chillington say. If you don't mind, I have a few questions about how conventions within genres, such as poetry, drama, or essays, can affect meaning. Well, Charles, I'll be happy to discuss that with you. Thank you, Mrs. Cameron. And might I say, that sweater certainly complements your eye color. What a suck-up, mumbled Akimi. Charles is trying to use his weaselly charm to make sure Mrs. C sends his essay up the line to Mr. Lemoncello. Don't worry, said Kyle. Mrs. Cameron isn't the final judge. Mr. Lemoncello is. And since he's a genius, he will definitely pick the essays you guys all wrote. Undoubtedly, said Pickleman. Thanks, Kyle, said Miguel. I just wish you could win with us, said Akimi. Well, maybe I can. Like you said, this is just a move back 3 spaces card. A take a walk on the boardwalk when someone else owns it. It's a shoot in Chutes and Ladders. A detour into the molasses swamp in Candyland. Yo, Kyle, said Miguel, exactly how many board games have you played? Enough to know that you don't ever quit until somebody else actually wins. He picked up his lunch and headed for the dirty tray window. Where you go? Akimi called after him. Where are you going? I have the rest of lunch and all of Saturday study hall to work on a new essay. But if Mrs. Cameron won't take it, maybe. But I've got to roll the dice one more time. Maybe I'll get lucky. I hope so, said Akimi. Me too. See you guys on the bus. Alright, that's the end of chapter 5. Hopefully you guys can actually see the cat that I'm petting and it's not too weird. Say hi, Linky. Oh. And I'll be back with chapter 6 tomorrow. So have a great day. Also, just so you know, I will be posting a couple story times today. One for little tiny babies and toddlers, and one for like 3 to 6 year olds that will have some about dinosaurs. So I'll see you later. Thank you.